All right, so hello and welcome to everyone. We are excited to have you be part of our grants information session here. We really appreciate the feedback that we've received from students about, just about the communications that have been going out about the grants. So just a bit of background. This is a brand new experience for our social work department to have 3 grants. There currently is a big push right now for grant funds to help students gain training in behavioral health to be able to increase the workforce. And so all 3 of our grants are aimed specifically at workforce development and training in slightly different areas. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. So a couple just, I guess, basic announcements of how we're going to communicate. So Maureen, Tyrese, and I are each going to take a moment to share with you about our specific grants. And then what will follow is on the very first day of classes, Tuesday, the 16th, we will be sending out this recording along with the application and any other materials that make sense to send out. We're going to send that out on Tuesday the 16th. And then we're going to have one deadline. We're going to do a relaunch and we're going to have one deadline and have one application for all grants. And so that deadline will be on January 30th. And so just to streamline things and help students be able to organize their time most effectively. So how we're going to do it is I'll share about the IBHC grant, and then I will pass it off. And then I think it would probably be best maybe to do questions at the end, because I think that there will be questions that might go across all 3 grants. And if not, then we'll delineate it.
And before we start, Nora, I just wanted to ask people to mute your mic, please, as we do presentations. And when we open it up for questions, feel free to come off.
Thanks, Tyrese. Okay, so the Integrated Behavioral Health Collaboration is a collaborative project. We have had a grant in the social work department since 2017. This is a federal grant that is funded through the Department of Health and Human Services, and it is specifically to increase the behavioral health workforce in medically underserved areas. And so in Western Mass and in lots of pockets throughout Massachusetts, there are medically underserved areas. And so this is really to help increase healthcare professional shortages, and also to really work towards increasing health equity and reducing the barriers and disparities that are present for people. So part of the grant for IBHC, students get a $10,000 training stipend, and that is paid $5,000 in the fall, $5,000 stipend in the spring. With that, students are placed in internships that have more of a team-based style. It's a more collaborative care teams. And there's a range of kind of integration. There's a range of different disciplines on each of the teams, but that students are learning about integrated behavioral health teams, learning about social determinants of health and what are the barriers that impact health equity. Students are placed in a specific seminar with only the fellows that are in the IBHC project. And some of the assignments in the advanced seminar are geared towards health equity, social determinants of health, and being able to provide social work practice within an IBH model, within an integrated behavioral health model. So one of the things that is very important for students to know about the IBHC grant is that students are required to do 2 additional things. You're required to attend an interprofessional educational activity So we do what are called poverty simulations, where this is an interactive simulation scenario of living a life of poverty, and people try to get their healthcare needs met at the same time. And so there's about 100 people who come together in real time. And it's a collaboration between social work, the PA program, the nursing program, and a few other disciplines on campus. So that's a 3-hour activity students would be required to attend. And the other is that students do what's called a health equity project. And this health equity project is an action-oriented project that they do within their field practicum site. And it is addressing a barrier to healthcare. So a barrier that impedes somebody's access to care. So for example, some people have looked at lack of Spanish resources, lack of resources that are available to people who Spanish is their first language. And they may increase, so a couple people have created different manuals or different sort of resource guides for clients that outline all the different available resources to them in the area that are Spanish speaking, or in another language if that is the case. I have right now, there's a woman who is doing a medical kind of integration internship, and it is entirely through telehealth with domestic violence and IPV survivors. And she's creating a completely telehealth related resource guide for people so that it could be sent out electronically. So the Health Equity Project is really very open to doing lots of different things, and we work very closely with students and their supervisors about it. But it's also really open to the creativity and interest of the student. And if there's more than one student placed at your internship site, you are able to do that together as a team. So those are the two big things to be thinking about in terms of, or three big things to think about in terms of integrated behavioral health. Is it's a specific training in that modality. It is, and it does require a few things outside of coursework. So I think that is, I feel like what I want to say for now about IBHC, and then I can answer questions afterwards. So I'm going to pass it on to Maureen from here.
Great, thank you, Nora. Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to speak about the Department of Mental Health Behavioral Health Paid Internship grant program. So this is a new grant for us this year. So we're in our first year. We received it for 2 years with the hope that the Department of Mental Health will be able to continue it moving forward, but no guarantees. This is a grant that we received across social work, both for the BSW students and advanced MSW students, as well as students in psychology and in the PA program. So it's interdisciplinary. So this grant really has two overarching aims. The first is that we're looking at workforce development, as Nora said, promoting the growth and stability of the public sector behavioral health workforce here in Massachusetts. And the other is to increase workforce that represents different resident populations in the Commonwealth. So this is including but not limited to people of color, different ethnicities, cultures, LGBTQI+, and so forth. So trying to really workforce development kind of across public sector and across backgrounds. So part of this application is certainly looking for, students that are interested in public sector behavioral health. Part of the application will ask you to provide an essay on kind of your knowledge, background, skills, let me look at this, interest, and so forth in working in community-based public sector, behavioral healthcare settings, looking at your previous social work related experience in those areas, and kind of what your goals are in having an internship in one of these settings. Students are also required to participate in the interprofessional experience Nora mentioned of the community poverty simulation. And then, you know, there's certain requirements by the grant moving through that, you know, certainly being in good academic standing, being able to maintain all of the kind of like, you know, stay engaged with all of the different paperwork that is required of you, the grant. And this is true of the others, will have at different points surveys that you need to complete that we're asking of you. And so failure to do that could jeopardize your participation in the grant. The DMH grant pays a $24 an hour rate. That going into next year will actually be paid as a stipend at the end of each semester upon completion of your, you know, fall semester hours and then your spring semester hours. And there are up to, I think, 20 spots that we could provide for MSW, advanced MSW students. Am I missing anything about the grant? I don't think so. There are certain agencies, so, you know, part of applying for this grant was being able to establish that we have relationships with community sector public health, you know, placements. And so we have those established, and the majority of them are in Western Mass, kind of west of Worcester. Yes. I think that's it. All
Well,
right.
thank you, Maureen. Hi, I'm Tyrese Tillman, for some of you who do not know me, and I'm the Practicum Education Director. And I sit with the RISE grant. It's a grant that it's a new grant. We got awarded it in May of 2023. And its focus, very similar to what Nora said and Maureen said around behavioral health, increasing the footprint and behavioral health and really paying attention to workforce development. That is its aim, while also understanding that there aren't many social workers who are trained in harm reduction. This grant is funded through the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, and it's awarded to us by a philanthropic agency called RISE out in the eastern part of the state. And their initiative is to really look at the opiate epidemic and find ways to create pipelines of social work students who are trained in harm reduction to step into the workforce with this added skill. It pays attention to finding students who resemble the communities that are normally affected by this epidemic. So it's paying attention to students who identify as BIPOCs, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it also pays attention to students who have had socioeconomic challenges. And so those are the criteria that we're looking at when finding applicants who are interested in stepping into in their last year of the social work program as advanced in your advanced practice settings, interested in learning harm reduction at its finest. And so some of the things to kind of consider in terms of this paid internship, it is through this year, we were doing it very similar to the EOHHS grant, where we were paying people at a hourly rate, factoring up to $12,960 for the academic year within this paid internship. And we're looking to do that differently next year, where we're paying students at a stipend rate of a little bit over $6,400 per semester. Some of the things that are outside of your normal internship experience at the second year advanced clinical internship is expecting that students are getting enough hours of harm reduction training through the many sites that we have identified this year, which are Mercy Medical Center, Tapestry Health, HRH 413, CHD, Adult Community Clinical Services, as well as I believe North Star Recovery Center. And so those just name a few of the agencies that we've worked with this year and working with some of our fellows. And it opens the opportunity for us to develop new relationships with agencies who have a major footprint within their organization that provide harm reduction training and workforce development when thinking about harm reduction. So the two asks is that students are taking on, are getting paid $18 an hour based on this academic year and doing up to 720 hours over the academic year, which breaks down to 360 hours per semester, as well as doing integrated learning through monthly seminars where we have guest speakers who come in and talk about harm reduction, and students get a chance to participate in harm reduction conferences. I'll share that students who are in this cohort this year got a chance to be a part of Simmons Harm Reduction Summit and spend 4 hours learning the various harm reduction kind of interventions and methods, as well as being open to letting students pick conferences and trainings that they wish to participate in. There's funding that is set aside for students who may have started their internship and got this great opportunity through their agency to hear about a harm reduction training in Massachusetts or outside of Massachusetts to participate in something like that. So we have some funding that goes towards that as well. I think that covers it all. One other thing is when we think about the recipients this year, we had 7 students who were identified for this cohort. Next year, because it's going to be funded by a different funding source, it's not going to be state funded. We'll have the chance to offer this to 5 students. So I think this allows for us to then open up questions.
Can I offer one clarifying point in relation to the DMH? I think I misspoke. I think I said $24 an hour. It's $34 an hour.
Okay, so I think we can. All right, so I think just if we were to put dollar signs next to things, because I know when I was a student that was really helpful, is that if Maureen's funded right through the state of Massachusetts, EOHHS, $34 an hour, 500 hours of advanced practicum is $17,000 a year. So Tyrese's grant, which is RISE with a focus on harm reduction, is just under 13,000. You're paid $18 an hour for 720 hours. So you're doing additional hours beyond the 500 that are required of you for our advanced practicum requirement. And then there's IBHC, that is your 500 hours of what is required, and that is a $10,000 stipend. So Maureen's grant, I think, has about 20 people. I have 24, and Tyrese has 5. So we have a lot of money to give away and a lot of really exciting training opportunities. I mean, this is so unusual for social work. And so it is so gratifying to see that the state and the federal dollars are finally being allocated to training social workers. Okay, so let's start with some questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions.
In the chat, Jen had asked around if the stipends are taxed. Is this taxed?
So my understanding is that it is a training stipend and that the stipend is not taxed. That is my understanding of how it works.
So we are making a change this year with the DMH grant from how we were doing it. So initially the students who are involved in the grant right now are receiving like a biweekly paycheck that is taxed. Moving it towards the stipend for next year, it is not taxed, but payroll has informed me that students need to know that you need to be keeping track of that, because obviously it will be income for you at the end of the year that hasn't been taxed. And so you have to figure out for yourself how that may fall.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the same for RISE.
Yeah.
Victoria?
Right. Two things. One is, in Western Mass here, RISE is also a dispensary, ironically. But the other thing is, could you share, Maureen, what the placements are for, or if you know, in the behavioral health, like both where and the types of placements, like PHPs or IOPs, or what people are doing?
Yep. So most of our placements are in our larger community mental health agencies. So for those of you that are familiar, thinking about like Behavioral Health Network, Clinical and Support Options, Center for Human Development. I'm trying to think. There's some in Gandara, I believe. And so within those, we're looking at particular sites that do have DMH funding. So most of them are adult focused. We have gotten away a little bit with some like youth residentials, but they get different funding. So we have so many placements already established in these organizations. These were already sites for us. So if you're interested in doing outpatient therapy, Behavioral Health Network has that, CSO has that, DME, CHD has that. I'm definitely forgetting. There's about 13 agencies total that I could pull up the list, but they're ones that we've already had students readily placed. And they do have to be receiving, we already went through, but receiving Department of Mental Health funding for those placements. I can pull up the list.
Jen?
I know when I attended the last IBH session, I was told that with the IBH grant, you guys blast out our resumes. Is that the same for the DMH grant and the RISE grant?
This is our first year, so we haven't done that, but it's something that we could consider.
And we haven't done it either. Most of the students who were placed were already placed, and we then, based on the sites that they were in, based on the sites they were in, it met the criteria for RISE, because we were looking for substance use and in addiction sites that had harm reduction already embedded in them. So when we think about just the application process, all of those students went through submitting their application and their resume, which would then be submitted to the site to kind of go through the interview process. I think that's going to be very similar in the way that we do it this year. I mean, for next year.
Okay, and same for like DMH.
No, I'm just speaking for RISE.
Yeah, can I just do a
Okay,
point?
is that the same for DMH?
I'm just going to do a point of clarification
Yeah,
because sort of a couple blasts we're talking about is, so there's sort of like the Tyrese just mentioned, sort of like the blast that happens when we're placing you into a practicum site. And then there's the IBHC piece where we do a graduate catalog. So at the end of the internship is we market you for a job. And so that's the blast. That's the second blast that's happening. And so,
Okay, sorry, I got that wrong.
yeah, that's no, that it's, we really do our best to try and help you get both the best training that is going to work for you, but then also, stack the deck in your favor to try and help you get a job after you're done. So
That's awesome. Can I ask one last question? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hog the. Can we apply to more than one grant? I know there was some stipulation there about not being sure.
Yes, we are happy to announce that that yes, we are going to do one application. That is why we're doing a relaunch. So we're going to do one application. There will be 3 different essay prompts depending on what grant you want to apply for, and you can apply for all 3. Although I think, Maureen, did you want to mention about the stipulation?
Oh,
So we don't want to restrict what students are able to apply for, but know that for DMH and I believe for RISE, you can correct that you can't receive more than 1 grant. Right. So there's a caveat around other funding and so forth. Yeah.
And if it's a work-based placement.
that makes sense.
Right. And so for the DMH grant too, we're looking at you cannot also be in a paid internship. So if it's and there's some things that get really nuanced here when people are doing employment-based internships, but so you can be in an employment-based internship and employed in your job, but you can't have that your internship be paid or be at a paid internship and be a recipient. So we would set that up. And if you were a recipient of DMH, we would place you somewhere. But it gets nuanced, and that is part of the application questions. Are you currently employed by, you know, a public sector behavioral health? Are you looking to be placed there? Are you paid as part of your internship?
But right now, I know that people have the DMH grant and they're working at CHG and they're getting paid like by the session. So they get $18 an hour per session they sit with a
Sure.
client, and they
Right.
get the $34 an hour.
I did. So that was like one caveat that came up after the fact. So we decided not to kind of take that
Okay.
away. And it's not, it's like a semi-paid internship. So, you know, we
Right.
have to
That's why I was
consider
like,
that.
it's not exactly like full
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. I appreciate it.
Is it Britta? Yeah, please.
It is, yes, thank you. I just was curious, and I think Tyrese kind of answered just, so we still go through the same application process, you know, we apply for the grant, and then we still work with the practicum placement. They're like 2 processes that go along at the same time, right? It's not that one depends on the other, or,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
And the beauty is where it doesn't get confusing is everything sits within the practicum department. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that you feel like you're still working with the same people on these 2 different tracks.
Other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering if any of the grants work with other age groups.
I'm sorry, age groups?
Oh, yeah, other age groups.
Uh-huh. Well, I can speak for IBHC. We have some students who are in school-based settings where they're providing integrated health. And so we have people working there. And in the past, we've also had people working with elders in a PACE program. So we're sort of across the continuum. The requirement really for IBHC is that the student needs to be working as part of a team. So while we haven't had an early intervention group yet, that would certainly be a placement that could potentially qualify for IBHC. So I feel like we could really sort of tap into across the lifespan.
And for RISE, it's usually 18 and up based on the sites that we're working with. When we think about harm reduction, you know, harm reduction in the grand scheme of things, I think there's not enough information out there when thinking about working with minors and harm reduction to really support that model. And so it's 18 and up.
And while the Department of Mental Health grant, the DMH funding is predominantly for adult populations, certainly if you're in a clinical setting where you're doing outpatient therapy, you can work with youth, families, groups up through elderly, right? So that isn't, it's just if you wanted to be in a youth specific site, there would be limited options there.
Sarah? Oh, I think you're muted.
Hi. I've heard a couple of times that I think it was the DMH grant program specifically that said it's open to BSW and advanced MSW students. I'm, for example, in the traditional, like an MSW traditional student. Does that mean that an application for that grant wouldn't be open to me, or are there specific tracks that are accepted and others that aren't?
It's open to all MSW students going into their advanced placement.
Okay.
Your final placement. Yep. So with the idea of workforce development, and ideally if students could then be hired into placements.
Got you. So it would be like in their final year of the program.
Yes, good clarification.
And I want to share in terms of RISE, we originally, because when we're thinking about behavioral health workforce development, we're sending this opportunity out to only second year advanced, advanced year students. And when we didn't have enough people to be recipients of this grant, RISE then opened it up for us to look at students who were in their foundation placements. And so that is something I will be talking with them about in relationship to next year. If we run into that same kind of caveat, will we approach it in the same way that we approached it this year?
Thanks, Tyrese. That's helpful.
Victoria?
Just going back to questions that were asked about the application process. So we need to meet the deadline by the 30th. And then I'm assuming you do a whole bunch of stuff. Are we also, like in January, would I be meeting with Sherrod, who's my counselor? So that's one, like the timing. And then the other thing was, because I hadn't heard about the blasting of resumes. And when I came to CCPH, it was like you as the department put up, specific individuals. Can you just share, Maureen, in terms of that DMH grant, how that passing us along to other agencies works? I'm not sure it matters that much, but I'm just curious.
I think it's going to be similar to the placement process in general, so that you all will apply for the grants that you're interested in. We'll go through our process in identifying and accepting students, and then you'll still be working with your practicum team member, who will know that you're a recipient of the grant and be able to talk with you about the different options of agencies that fall under the grant and what you're interested in within that. So it'll be a similar process. It just narrows kind of your options a little bit for placement. And then when you two together decide, like, yes, I'm very interested in this site or this type of work, your resume will be sent, for review and have that interview process and all of that. So it's not.
But it's not like till February, right? It's after the deadline process, just from a timing perspective, it's next month or something, or beyond February, depending on, right? Is that?
Right. And you might meet with Sherrod in the meantime to start talking about different things, and he'll know that you've, whomever has applied. But yes, I mean, I don't want to speak for the practicum teams.
It's a continuation. And so you start this process with us now, right? And as you submit your applications for the grant, it's just an ongoing conversation. Because, let's be honest, some people may apply for the grant, may be accepted into it, and then may decide to not. We've had those experiences. And so we want to make sure that there's a person who's walking you through every step of the way, the same person in terms of continuity. So yeah, you'll probably be in conversation with Sherrod soon. And then, if you apply for the grant, he's going to be the one who's helping you navigate next steps in terms of placements with your site, as well as if it's IBHC, working with whoever the IBHC person is. Nora, I don't think we got a chance to talk a little bit about that. And I think this is a great opportunity to segue into it. We hired specifically a coordinator for IBHC, through the IBHC grant, that will be working with all of the recipients of this grant, anyone who gets awarded the grant. So this person is within and embedded in our our department, and we'll be working closely with whoever is assigned to you as a practicum advisor.
And we have the opportunity to introduce him right now.
Yes. So George Perez comes to us. He just started at the beginning of this month, and just want to give him an opportunity to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So that would be me. This is my second day actually on campus. So I'm still getting to know people and places, but I'm looking forward to working with you in some capacity in the very near future. So yeah.
Thank you, George.
Yeah.
Thanks, George. We are very thrilled to have you joining Westfield State.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So there was another question in the chat from Sarah about, do any of the grants have opportunities working with children in healthcare in medical settings? So I can answer that for IBHC. The answer is yes. We currently have students placed in the adolescent partial hospitalization program, and we also have students placed in school-based settings and in primary care office, where they're working with, you know, again, across the lifespan, but children are definitely part of it. Because of the new online track, the IBHC grant has added in new community partners across the state. And so if somebody was interested in, so for example, if somebody was interested in working in a pediatric setting, and they were, you know, we may work together to try and find, and they're in the online program, let's say you're out in the Boston area, I would be working with you to try and find, well, George would be working with you now, to be working, you know, to find you a placement that really kind of fits the needs of integrated behavioral health with a specific focus on pediatrics. So we really needed to pivot some of our practicum placement settings around to meet the needs of online students who aren't here in the Western Mass area. So I hope that answered that. Oh, good. Okay, it did. She said, great, thank you. For those of you for the recording, she said thanks that we answered that question. Other questions from people? Okay.
Wait, I'll ask one more.
Please, yes.
As Tyrese knows, I tend to be a little light on know something, but so what is the pool? The number of us that are looking for placements versus the close to, it sounded like 50 spots that are open. Like, are there 5 times as many students? Are there 2 times? What's sort of the odds in a way?
Yeah. I want to say we'll almost have 50% of students eligible to receive, you know, or there's 50% of students almost would be recipients of a grant. So it is great odds of getting a grant. And so we really, our goal is to give out every cent we have. We don't want to leave money on the table. There's no reason to leave money on the table. There's such a need for people to both get paid to be trained, and a need for increasing our workforce in this area. So spread the word far and wide. So I don't have any last comments for IBHC other than to say that, you know, as we said earlier, we will be sending out a whole email blast on the first day of classes on Tuesday, the 16th, right? The 16th, with this recording, along with the centralized single application. And then the deadline to return it will be June 30th. I'm sorry, not June 30th, January 30th. June 30th is the end of the fiscal year. January 30th. And yeah, so that's my last comment. How about you, Maureen?
No, I think we covered just about everything. I'm seeing a question come in. Let me, do all of the grants have projects? Do we present these projects? All of the grants do not have projects. But Nora, if you want to speak about the presentation piece.
So as we said, the IBHC does have a project. They'll do a health equity project. At the end of the year, all of the IBHC fellows come together for an end of the year celebration. And a couple people, typically self-chosen, volunteer to share their projects. Most, all of the fellows do submit kind of a PowerPoint presentation. You don't necessarily have to be on camera if you don't want to be, but that describing your project, and because the projects are typically practicum based, they share it with their supervisor. So if you are, you know, if you're not interested in doing sort of presentations, you know, there's definitely ways that you can complete your project without having to present it. Yet, if that's an opportunity that you really want to take advantage of, we can definitely make that happen as well.
And I guess I would just add that because we're currently in the first year of the DMH grant, the Department of Mental Health is continuously surveying students, looking at this. There's a team of us, there's 4 universities across the Commonwealth that have this grant. We're coming together to talk about it. And so, you know, I don't know that this would happen, but certainly changes could come that impact the second year of the grant, that may include a project, or may include, we would alert people to that as quickly as we knew, but I'm not sure as they're gathering data, kind of how that may impact year 2 of the grant. So I'll just put that in there.
And to Maureen's point in relationship to RISE, because this is a newer grant for us, this grant, we got awarded at the tail end of it. There are 3 other universities that started this process with RISE almost 3 years ago. And the way that they developed their program, there have been opportunities for students to present their work and working with agencies to, you know, to conferences. There was, I believe Simmons College was one of them, who went to a conference in New York, and due to the students' focus within their harm reduction site, they presented within that conference. I don't know what will come of it as we're moving into being funded through a different entity and keeping this going. But as I get information, I would be then sharing it out to the folks who would be interested in this RISE grant.
Can I just make, this is not exactly on topic for this, but related is, I don't know if you know, there's a statewide women's commission that has appointed commissioners, and then every region has a women's commission. So it's the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. And right now I'm the vice chair on the Massachusetts Commission of the Status of Women and Girls. And there's one in Hamden. And when you're talking and there are students wanting to make these making the presentations, I feel like, I don't know how, but it'd be great to connect somebody at Westfield with somebody at the state or the regional levels, because our goal is to find out what the issues are in our area. And then we have great relationships with legislators, and we try to, and there's also like a women's coalition at the state. So if there's an interest, like when you said the Spanish speaking, I feel like there's some, also all the commissions are always looking for good projects and things where there's something. So I don't know what, when, or the timing, and I don't want to overburden anybody, but if there's any way that I can help make connections on these, this is the kind of thing we all super care about. You know, like the IM bill and the school food lunch, and like there's so many things the women's commissions are involved in that really matter for lifting people out of poverty. And I feel like this is so in alignment across the state. So just putting it out there, if anybody wants to reach out, or if I can do anything, I think we really could make a difference as a school for the state.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
100% agree. And that's been one of the exciting things that has happened for us, I feel like, with these grants, is that we're learning about all these pockets making having the opportunity to make amazing change and being able to make these connections. And so so I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up. All right, any other questions before we end? All right, thank you everyone for your time, and we look forward to getting your applications.